and we're about to get into the build itself. I do like the Eduard plastic. It's just got that right, what would I say, consistency, not too soft, not too hard. It's sort of Goldilocks, and I think most people would agree. I do use my PE bender in this build. I actually use it quite a lot. I wouldn't say it's necessary, but it definitely can make life a lot easier. So one thing I did want to mention, just because I never really see it come around too much, but I did do a bit of research. Everyone thinks it's a Mitsubishi Zero, which fair enough it is, but just to give you a little bit of the background while we go through some of this cockpit. The Mitsubishi was who originally made these Zeros, but as the war progressed, a lot of that was subcontracted to Nakajima. The interesting thing, or the irony here, is that Nakajima actually made more Zeros in the end. I think there was something like 7,000, someone can correct me if I'm wrong, that were made, but about 60% were actually made by Nakajima in the end. The interesting thing is that the Mitsubishi ones arguably had a little bit more quality in the sense that they were maybe a bit more relaxed earlier in the war. So for example, and I'll come back to this as we get to the cockpit seat, it's almost a classic example where the early Mitsubishi seats were nice, soft molded, I guess more resources, more time and so on, whereas the Nakajima seats tended to be riveted and maybe a bit more, let's say, practical emphasis. So you can see here just some of the detail, or minuscule detail maybe is a better way to put it, to do this cockpit. Like I say, it can appear a bit overwhelming at first, but I think it's just one step at a time. There's no other way maybe to do it. If you try and rush it, you're going to get into a big mess. I can see that. And this is some of the smallest photo etch work I've ever done, for sure. Do you need the parts bender? No, but I think if you're going to be doing a lot of this type of work, yeah, it'll make your life a lot easier. This is miniature box building. It's straight out of sheet metal work in school and apprenticeship. So you can see here the detail. Yes, you can do that with tweezers and so on, but I do think in this case, when you've got so much of it, it's probably worth spending the money. All the detail is there like you generally expect. I did screw up on the throttle quadrant. I had to scratch build that because, believe it or not, I lost mine. I can't even say it went to the carpet god because I have a tile floor here. It dropped on the floor and vanished. What I have done here is I've made my own resin part. I upgraded from the stock standard, what would I say? The standard issue that come in the box, and I had some fun playing around. So in this case, you can see that it's a little bit more detailed is probably one way to put it. And this is how I got into my research about the differences between the Nakajima and the Mitsubishi planes. Interestingly, I have a ton of these seats. If you do want one or however, I have no idea how to even do I can make them, but I don't know if people are interested in this type of stuff at all. It was easy enough to make. Definitely always happy to hear from people in the comments. So that's one of the places I learn a lot. So yeah, if you know more than me, definitely, because I like learning and I know others do. So this is the sort of, the amount of photo etch I was doing here was really crazy. And some curved photo etch. You'll see here I'm using the end of a paintbrush to get that curve, the curve there. So you can see here how this is going together. As I said, this is probably the toughest photo etch work I've ever done, but the results really speak for themselves, I think. It's just one of those ones. You could not use the photo etch, but my attitude is I've got the limited edition, the photo etch is there, so why not try and use it? The instructions are actually very good in showing you what needs to be removed. It's basically anything that's red. If you want to go down the PE route, you've got to cut it off, grind it off, sand it off, whatever. So that's the belts, that's the cockpit floor coming together now. Again, at this point, it's really just taking your time, being patient. For me, one thing that I do is I'll use CA, super glue, whatever you want to call it, and I'll just dab it on using toothpicks or cocktail sticks. The belts and harnesses, there you go. That's how I apply the CA. One interesting thing I did learn over the years, and interestingly, I think it was from the fly fishing people, the CA is pressure sensitive. So if you give it a squeeze, it'll help it set. So this actually shows a good example of just how delicate some of this photo etch was. It really is quite amazing. And I guess from a design point of view, it's cool, but there is a satisfaction when you actually can get this done at that scale. Some of this is, what's that, maybe like 32nd of an inch and stuff like that. You're talking 1 and 2 mils for some of this. It really is super fine. So you can kind of see here just how detailed it is. I actually had another problem, which is these tweezers, and they're my favorite tweezers, had picked up some magnetic influence, let's say. They'd become magnetized, or I don't know if that was from me playing around or they were purchased that way. But it gave me a few headaches. What would I say? The consoles or instrument panels themselves, yeah, it all goes together pretty nicely. I can't say there was any dramas with fit at all. The biggest problem that I probably had was I tend to be a bit cheap on my super glue. So that meant that two things. One is that I probably don't use enough at times. And I'm actually not sure if using my, what would I say, supermarket super glue is always the best. I have bought the $20 super glue before. Sorry, I keep saying super glue, but to be more serious, CA, cyanoacrylate, all of those. I've never really noticed a huge difference between the expensive ones and the cheap ones, but I could be wrong. Definitely let me know if you do have more thoughts on that, because it's one of those ones I've never really, what would I say, got a satisfactory solution to. On one hand, I've almost just got used to using the home improvement super glue. Like I said, I've been frustrated in the past. I've paid a lot of money and not really, what would I say, got the entire benefits, but that could have just been me at the time. So there's the main instrument panel. Again, the detail these days is really, really stunning. I wish I could. So on one hand, when you build these things, you want to claim the credit, and sure, there's a lot of credit in just being that finicky and detailed, but at the same time, yeah, just what they're able to manufacture to allow you to do that is really quite amazing. At this point, there's a bit of a smug look on my face as you kind of get to these almost modular finishes. Another part I did research, I've been studying a lot lately, was these ejector ports. I did discover, I don't know if I discovered, but it's probably the wrong word, a bit presumptuous. Stumbling around, I was like thinking about, well, hang on, where does all the shell casings go? They can't go into the cockpit. So yeah, they're the ejector ports for those machine guns. Otherwise, you're going to have a lot of hot brass floating around in the cockpit with you, which probably wouldn't be that much fun if it landed in the wrong places. Again, yeah, Eduard fit, no problems at all. I wouldn't say this is not shake and bake at all. It's not like in that Tamiya zone. This is a different type of fit. It's a lot more subtle. I think most of you will know what I mean. In that the sense of the mating surfaces, the pins and so on, tend to be a lot more delicate in Eduard than say Tamiya and others. Interestingly, the whole cockpit assembly just pushes up through the base there. So it's not, I quite like doing it that way because you're not having to worry about making things fit in the cockpit and get the fuselage seated properly. Now we're on to the undercarriage itself, or at least, well, I shouldn't say the undercarriage. This is really part of that, just that wing assembly. Again, yeah, no problems at all. I'm almost, you get to this point where you're like, what can I tell you about it? It goes together really nice. There's some extra detail that comes on this, what would I say, after the cockpit, but again, it's in this case not much to be seen. As mentioned, I'm not too afraid of hand brushing when necessary. Yeah, I tend to be, what would I say, economical with my airbrush. If I've got paint in the cup and I can use it for other things in advance, I will do so. Again, I'm not afraid to hand brush if it makes sense and practical. You can see here we're starting to look like a real airplane now. Wings going on. The wing roots, no problems at all. So you can see there how that's really starting to look pretty neat. As I was saying, I think the Japanese planes tend to be underestimated, especially something like the Zero. At the outbreak of war, it was arguably the best fighter in the world, but especially, say, 109s, 190s, all that stuff tends to get a lot more of the limelight. Even the early Spitfires and stuff did, what would I say, take a bit of catch up. The world was really genuinely shocked, I think, when they first encountered Zeros. They'd heard rumors of them and what they were getting up to in China and so on, but really, I think it was a bit of a shock. And especially, obviously, Pearl Harbor, Midway and so on. That's that Sakai engine. There's not a lot of build in the engine here. I don't mind that because 148 I'm not really thinking too much about the engine. Most of it you're just going to see through the cowling anyway. It's not in particular an engine build. There is jig here or some tooling to get that cowling set straight, which just one of those nice little touches. It just makes the world a little bit easier. So you can see how you can build around that jig and you'll get it formed correctly, because there's half a dozen pieces. On the engine itself, there's I think the manifold ring and a few other bits and pieces, maybe half a dozen pieces. This is not an engine build kit, although you could go aftermarket and definitely expand that if you wanted. I'm just not sure. If I was going to do that, I'd probably do it at 1/32. The masking included. Again, no problems at all. I think this is where Eduard does really well, in that if you're buying separate masking, that's easy, $10, $20 and so on. So as a value proposition, these are really good kits. What I'm doing here or there was just showing you that with the masking itself, you can probably even use some pencil or something like that if you're unsure of where the marking is. The cowling color here, this is Mr. Color, obviously, as you can see. This is a really cool color. I wish I used it more as a black substitute. And it's, as you can see, it's, what would I say, almost a really, really dark brown. I don't know how else to explain it, but what is it? In that artistic world, that there's no true blacks. So you can see here that I'm also using it to do the inside of the cockpit. So the frames we'll get to later, you can see they turn out as that dark cowling color. Super blackish dark brown. And on to, what would I say, the Wheaton color, 33660. There's a bit of trial and error and testing and, what would I say, homebrew witchcraft to get this color right. I'm always amazed that none of the manufacturers ever seem to make one of the iconic Japanese colors. I don't really understand that at all. If you look at a Tamiya kit, any kit, you're always having to do these sort of homebrew recipes. I don't generally, what would I say, even give the percentages, because when I try and follow the instructions across all the manufacturers, I end up having to experiment a bit of a dash of this and dash of that and eye of Newton and whatever else. Whenever I go 2-to-1 or 50%, whatever, never seems to work for me unless I start playing around a bit. And here, this is me. Like I said, I'll tend to, if I've got paint in the airbrush and I can use it for other things, I may as well while I'm there. That's just lazy, and I hate cleaning my airbrush. Color wise, it's just one of those really weird things. Another thing I would add just while you're watching paint dry is on the Nakajima Mitsubishi, like I said, everyone thinks Mitsubishi Zero, but in the end Nakajima actually made more, but it gets more complicated because as the war went on and spares and things become a bit more jumbled, you'll get Nakajima planes mixed with Mitsubishi and so on. What I'm using here is a circle cutter to make these masks to do the roundels, or the proper Japanese word is Hinu-maru. And I know I've completely butchered that, but Hinomaru. Hinomaru. So these are really quite simple, just a $10 circle cutter, some masking tape, and you get a really, really cool effect. As a heads up, I did make a slight error on the undersurface wings, in that the roundels, Hinomaru, were a bit too small on the first go, so I do come back and you'll see that. But this is a really, really neat way of getting this done. No problems at all there. And like I say, that's just a $10 circle cutter. If you are going to buy the circle cutter, like most of those things, I would suggest buy a set of spare blades and then you've got them forever. It's always pretty sweet feeling to see the masking come off. One mistake I did make, this is me fixing the undersurface, so that would be another mistake. One thing I would say, on the fuselage, I actually regret that I did the Hinomaru too early. I should have done them last, after I did the banding and lettering, because it would have made just the measurements and so on that much be a bit more accurate, a bit easier. So there, this is all pretty sweet. And one other thing I'd say, in this case I do a very light coat just to seal the edges, and the nice thing about lacquer is it dries so fast. So you could see there I do almost a test little spray and then light coat, get it sealed, and you're good. That's the engine finally being glued on. Very Very, very nice little engine, but like I say, it's not an engine building kit. If you want to go detail on the engine, I'd suggest, but what would be the point? You'd want to do it open cowled, or either that or go 1/32. To me, that's just my opinion. As always, definitely give me your thoughts on that. To me, I just wasn't that bothered at all. I was not bothered that the engine, it looks good, does the job, but I was almost relieved, I suppose, in that you're not wasting a lot of time for something you're never going to see. So that's where it's at this point, and I'm pretty happy with it. It's looking very cool. Definitely, if you can get away with masking, it always gives a much better effect than decals. So this is I don't know what I'd even call it. I use scraps of tissue paper off the bench and dampen them to seal and protect, in this case, the cockpit. Never had a problem with it, works well. And I was also in a sort of dilemma on the order of this, but in the end, I decided to do the canopy separate so that it gave me a bit more flexibility on the antenna mast and some other things that need to go in. So like the gun sight and so on that need to be put in there. What I was also going to say is on those Hinumaru, wow, I'm starting to sound a bit better with my Japanese, that the pure red ones was for the Japanese Army. If it's got a white border, that was used by Japanese Navy, and interestingly, it was used by the Japanese Navy from the 1930s, more so on the dark green to give better visibility. Then they started to, in the later part of the war, drop the white, I guess, needs must sort of thing. Interesting one here is on this banding, I've used 2 reds. And again, this is my research and following even the instructions and reading. The banding is a deeper red than on the Hinamaru. The rounders are probably getting carried away on that at this point. But it is a deeper, darker red. So there's some late afternoon sun shining through there. It's not one of those ones where, I'd say that I would actually go as far as to say if you use the same red for both, you'd be making a mistake. So maybe that's not the best shot there, but you will see that the banding is a much deeper red. And at this point, we're on to the decals. I'm trying to almost think about, like that's probably a good shot there. The banding is a deeper, darker red. On the propellers, the Japanese propellers have a brown wood sort of color on the backside. I hand brushed first. You can see here I've hand brushed it and then just do the edges with the airbrush, because I was kind of like, well, to make masks for that is gonna, I'm not gonna lie, I was just getting a bit lazy. It would have taken ages. The wheels are nice because the rims and tires are separate, so that just makes it an easy paint job. Again, here's more of my tissue paper stuffed into what would I say? It's just an easy way of masking and protecting, no problems at all. Undercarriage. I'd say the undercarriage is a bit flimsy, but again, if you're patient, let it set properly before you start doing practice landings and so on your workbench. Not that anyone would ever do that, right? One thing here which I did do different, because the canopy I had painted separate and I did want it to blend in nicely, rather than using canopy glue, I used just regular plastic glue. The reason is it tends to melt it a bit, and that almost helps, what would I say, get a bit better seal. On this one, you can see as the masking's coming off, I've got that cowling color on the inside and I think the wheaten cream color on the outside. So at this point, we're getting pretty sweet. I'm really quite thrilled with where it's at. Here's some more photo etch. Like I said, there's a ton of photo etch in this kit. And it was really good experience and practice for me to get to this level as well. So I think sometimes it is really worth pushing yourself, because when I first bought this kit, I looked at the instructions and thought, oh no. But again, take your time. So these are like, 2mm, maybe high, they're 32nd of an inch, some of these parts. The decals, I know I'm going to upset people, but I'm not a huge fan of Eduard decals. I think they're a bit too fragile and break a bit. So do be careful with these. I was able to salvage a couple of my screw-ups there, but they're not as forgiving as Cartograph, that's for sure. I did have a couple panic attacks while I was messing around doing this. But at this point, yeah, I'm hugely thrilled. One thing I should also say, the actual lettering here on the fuselage, and again, I can't read Japanese at all, so don't hold me to this. But essentially, that's a donor or sponsor's name that's showing up here. So it's just one of those, again, little cool tidbits. I do hope you've liked this build. I really enjoyed it. Highly recommend it. Yeah, hit me up in the comments. Love hearing from you all. Enjoy. Have a great time with your own builds. Let me know how it goes. Thanks again.